So Rug.Fun, it's like a competition between these tokens, and the number 1 token in the pool and the number 10 token in the pool both get launched into a liquidity pool, and the rest get rugged. If there's 50,000 meme coins launched a day, it's impossible to have any edge in picking which one of these animal pictures from MySpace in 2006 is going to go up.
Sounds like a skill issue.
Yeah, Tervo, they might put me in jail because you mentioned Rug.Fun on the podcast, brother.
Before we get into today's episode, just a quick disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast by either myself or any guest are their personal views and do not represent the views of any associated organization. Nothing in this episode should be construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or other advice. All right, let's jump into the episode.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. We have something new and exciting going on today. I'm joined by the Page One crew, Boffin, Tervo, and Tolks. We're going to be trying out a new format. Like going forward, we're going to do conversations with other analysts, researchers, participants, etc. from time to time. Before we get started, Tolks, Tervo, Boffin, do you guys want to give a little background on yourselves and how you guys got started in the space? I'm going to have to pick. Okay.
I'll kick it off. I got into crypto in like 2021, fall 2021. I had been like crypto adjacent. Like I had some friends who were into it, and I was just watching like NFT sales basically. And I just kept seeing like punks selling for absurd amounts of money, like the dumbest stuff in the world. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, like I'm just going to try this. And if I lose this money, like I probably deserve to lose this money. And so one of my buddies from college was in Moon Overlord's Discord. And so he sent me an invite there. And I basically just sat in the one from August until like perpetually. And so everything got shoveled through there, just every pile of garbage and also every diamond. Like it was September, and End, who went on to be the product designer of Treasure, was like just kept telling us to buy like Treasure NFTs, and I was like, dude, I don't want to buy your white words on black background. Like, and then that took off. We basically saw like everything from there, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, so I came in obviously through Moon Overlord's Discord too. That's kind of where we all ended up meeting. But I came in kind of more through the daily fantasy sports and sports gambling avenue. I was playing daily fantasy sports pretty much as the sole income leading up to COVID, and then obviously COVID happened and sports were shut down. And I was very aware of crypto because I mean through gambling sites and whatnot, it was kind of a background topic here and there, and I was never deeply interested in it until COVID hit. Obviously, sports were done, so it was really kind of 2020 that I just fully dove in and never looked back. So I've been aware of it since I'd say probably 2017. Like I remember some BCH just showing up in my Coinbase account at the time. I was too dumb and sold it and never decided to look deeper into the space. But yeah, so I've been around kind of observing for I'd say probably close to 7 years now, but fully since 2020.
With football, like fantasy football, I guess fantasy sports. Wait, I need to let Boffin introduce himself, and then we're gonna dive into that.
I think it's kind of hilarious though. The law keeps adding on. No, okay. Like I've been in crypto since 2012, like on and off, where I was I think mining Dogecoin. So I think I went 2013 actually. But no, I've been kind of on and off since 2012, 2013. But I've been full time in crypto since 2020 or so, when I kind of founded my own blockchain startup to do with like infrastructure, and then sold that to a CEX. And then in the meantime, that's like on the professional side, but the curiosity side was kind of being on Twitter and CT And then I think, as Tervo and Tolks have said, joining kind of Moon Overlord's server for NFTs and just kind of meeting the guys there and getting the market sentiment, so on and so forth. So yeah, no, that's a very quick background.
I thought the one was set up by you guys and not Moon Overlord, but I guess you guys all joined and met there.
Yeah, that's where we all started linking up there, and that's kind of how Page One came together. That's where when me and Terv started talking in there and posting in there. I think we sent the first couple ones just in the Discord, like in a separate channel there, to link out, and then we started publishing off of that.
Yeah, it was basically like January 22, and I was talking to one of our buddies who was a mod about. I was like, hey, like if you leave for a week, like if you're on vacation or something, you come back and everybody's talking about something completely different. And at the time, there wasn't. I guess there might have been, and I just wasn't as exposed to it. But I feel like there wasn't nearly as much independent crypto reporting in 2021, 2022 as there was even in the bear market. It's like there were a lot of people like NFT threaders and stuff started popping up a lot more. And when we started Page One, I was just trying to make like the thing that I wanted, and it wasn't really available. There were definitely some people like Lucky Trader was still around, and they grew out of daily fantasy sports too. And so they're still around. Tyler and Logan are awesome. But I was like, what if I just wrote like a weekly recap? I think I started off as like daily, and it was like, okay, that's impossible. But then eventually it evolved, and then we picked up Tolks. He started doing everything that wasn't just pictures. I was the picture guy. I'm not, I don't think about DeFi protocols and stuff. Like that's his realm. And then a couple months after that, probably like March or April, we picked up Boffin, and he's our esoteric essayist. But yeah, that's kind of how Page One started.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely agree with you that there's been this pop up of like Fredders. Even like if you just look at airdrop threading, it wasn't this big, and now it's like information asymmetry is getting so small since everything is just out there all the time. Talking about esoteric writings, Boffin, I read your, I guess like your gaming essay / criticism, and I kind of wanted to like we already talked about this in DMs, but I wanted to ask you like where you see how you would divide current games out there right now, because like I think of fantasy.top as a game, not as SocialFi. I feel like a lot of people claim it's SocialFi. I don't think so. And like then there's projects like Pixels, and then Prime, like parallel TCG. How do you spend your time looking into these things? Do you think it's like worth looking into everything, or like what's your mental model behind that?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think starting with fantasy top, I think it can be both. It can be SocialFi and the game at the same time because, like, gamification, I think is kind of inbuilt into it, where you have to tweet out and you have to collect cards and stuff. I'm not personally on there. I think I passed very early on to be on it to be like, oh, it's just Twitter CT people. How big can it get? And that's kind of biting me in the ass right now. But I think aside from that, it's interesting because it creates a sort of connection between the person who is the card, so to speak, the creator or the KOL, if you want to call them that, and then the fans, subscribers, collectors, or whatever. So there's like it's a positive enforcement loop sort of going on into it where, hey, you got to be active, otherwise you get points, so on and so forth, and everything's incentivized. So it's like a nice kind of loop going on there. And that can be one type of game, and it's like a social community game. But then, like you said, there's other games as well, like there's Pixels, there's Parallel and Prime, one of the bigger examples. But I think there's also like a third set of games that people don't talk about, and there's like more like on-chain games. So you have, I think, Redstone is one of them, and there's other stuff like you have Sky Strife, you have there's another one. There's one recent today. I think it's called like Dia or Dyrdear, which basically like you have to connect to a different kind of optimism chain, and it's like an on-chain gaming, but it's very it's cheaper kind of to use. And that's also interesting because on-chain gaming isn't explored as much as people would like it to be, if that makes sense. But then the background or the alternate side of it is it's too simple in that regard, or it's like it's too niche for people to even know about these things. And that's coming from just like a lot of noise everywhere and all sorts of things. Like I said, like threading is huge now. You have airdrop threaders, you have like normal threaders, you have at one point there was also whitelist threaders, if we've seen that. But the divide between them is interesting because you see things like you have Web3 games, which I say are not that good. It's basically taking strategies which already work in gaming before in the bad way, and then putting them in Web3, which people already hate. So you're combining the hatred of AAA gaming and how the companies already monetize, and then adding them to a tech which people also don't like, and that's just giving everything a bad example. But then you have other stuff which kind of use blockchain stuff on the background and then power it in a way that kind of makes sense, like parallel. But because it's got that dirty blockchain word attached to it, it's not gonna do well in the social norm, so to speak. So I mean, it's interesting, right? Like there's so much stuff going on, but there's not enough attention on it. And the attention that you get like YouTubers like John, I think his name is, where he will kind of talk about being a gamer and trying out actual crypto games. And most videos are completely fair and valid, where the games are not working, they're not online, or like they need NFTs to go into them. And that is kind of the lens that people view crypto games from, because a lot of people have to realize that games in crypto aren't isolated to just games in crypto. They also have to compete with the actual big games, like the indie titles or the AAA games. And if your product is not kind of lining up to that expectations of the norm that you've established, and it's just kind of really cumbersome to use and not that good, and then you add in the blockchain and be like, oh, but you need this NFT as a battle pass, or you need this NFT as a land to kind of work, people are not going to do that. And at the same time, they used to cost so much, not anymore. Like it's all relatively dead right now. But no, I think it's yeah. I mean, that's my yapping about the entire topic.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I apart from the on-chain gaming bit, I tried out a couple of those games. Like I spent yesterday and like I guess like all weekend to play Skystrife, and it's just too simple because I think it's like all meant to be on chain. So it is too simple, but I also don't want to mid with something at the very very beginning of like a narrative because it might just end up working out and they might be able to build like more complex stuff. Like you said, they're like making it super cheap now. Redstone has like I think it's cheaper than L2s, which is good. Like that's what you want. But I'm still like, I guess going to mid with it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Talks Turbo, you guys play any on-chain games, or if you're like interested in these like new fully on-chain games at all. But I can't seem to play them for longer than an hour max.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not. I was never really the gamer growing up. So, but I mean, I try and keep eyes on the space. I mean, as far as kind of like funding and development to mindshare goes, like the mindshare that gaming has now, obviously a lot of people throughout really the past 3 to 4 years have been really excited about just kind of the crypto gaming sector in general, and we obviously had Axie come out of that. But at really the past, I'd say year and a half, 2 years. I mean, you have Prime, which has, I'd say, a good amount of mindshare, but outside of that, I mean, it's been relatively quiet. But with, I mean, the Axie example, like if there is something that sticks like that, you see how quickly the momentum can grow. So it's something definitely to keep eyes on. But personally, like right now, there's nothing really outside of Parallel Prime that has my attention, unless I'm missing something, Boffin.
No, I mean you have like other games that people like. There's like Shrapnel was the other shooter that people talk about. There's Mavia, I think. How we pronounce that? That's basically in a nicer way of saying it's like a reskinned Clash of Clans, but with tokens in it. Like you have stuff like that, but like there is no, and Pixels obviously. You have Pixels as well.
Isn't Dead Drop is the one? What's the guy's name? Boffin,
Doctor
streamer
Disrespect.
guy. Yes, and that one's
Oh,
kind of interesting. It's I think the on chain games like that type of game just has a limited market, even in regular gaming. It's like the most popular games are ones that are just fun to play, easy to pick up. Because even with parallel, it's like there are a lot of people who are actually very passionate about playing parallel and very much enjoy it. Who, it's like I see them on Twitter sometimes, and it's not like these people are, on chain adepts like me and like us. Like they're more focused on just parallel or just this, that, the other thing. And I think that's where you'll get to see more development in on-chain gaming, is when there are just more options for people to play. But I think the comparison of Fantasy Top to a game versus SocialFi is very accurate, just because like it's very much like daily fantasy sports, in that like, because you see like D's and Andy in them talking about it, and then you see people who are running like these spreadsheets and stuff, and it's all the same type of thing as daily fantasy sports. So in many ways it's closer to that than it is SocialFi, but it's, it kind of mixes it. It's I'm really interested in seeing how it develops, just because like there's so much power in the creators' hands right now. It's and like they've done a good job so far of managing supply, like that type of thing. I think the mechanics that are in place, it's not like I've conducted a economic study of this game economy, and that's kind of Boffin's deal more than it's mine. But I've been impressed with the so far lack of dilution, but it's like as they continue to add more people in, as they continue to develop more tournaments, this, that, the other thing, it'll be very interesting to see just how the economy develops in it, because I don't there's so much power in them being able to tweak something, and then it changes all these dynamics. But at the same time, a lot of people so far aren't like I said, the people who have these fantasy sports like style spreadsheets, and they're analyzing like, oh, the variance of this card and the inflation. It's like I saw D's talking about these things. I was like, dude, I have no idea what this means. But there's a level of complexity to it that gives it the opportunity for it to be somebody's main focus. And I tweeted like the other day that the NFT market is kind of, at least, like the NFT market as we knew it in 2021, 2022, even into 2023. Like when I was writing page one, it's like you can go back and read these page one NFT recaps, and there's probably 15 projects a week between updates, new projects, and upcoming launches. And largely they're very similar. It's like, okay, well, somebody's doing this type of thing, and somebody's got a different skin on it over here. But at some point it was kind of boring. And I tweeted that volume and those participants have gone towards things that are more complex, that are more interesting because they're more complex, like Fantasy Top and Friend Tech, and also towards things that are more interesting because they're simpler, like Memecoins. And it's like there's some level of complexity in NFT markets, because like if you're Cyrus and you know absolutely all of the Bored Ape traits, and it's like, oh, I see this one in NFTX in the pool, and I know that this is a rare trait and I can sell that. It's like, but that's almost as deep as like being an NFT pro goes. Whereas with Fantasy Top, there's more things that you can look at. There's more opportunity for somebody to remain interested in it over time, versus NFTs, where it's really just like, meme coins with pictures. And there's only so much you can do there before you need to provide users with something more interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll talk about NFTs a little bit, I think, later. But I kind of want to touch up on that thing you said about the dilution and how they made the card dynamics work, like they're basically running back FIFA Ultimate Team, but as like fantasy football, right? Because the pack opening system is exactly the same, like the rare, etc. And I think like it's also, I'm not sure if it's the right word to use, but it's kind of like gotcha mechanics. And Boffin was talking about this, I think 2 days ago, basically like verifying on chain about like rarities and stuff. And that's kind of what you were mentioning as well, Tervo, where it's like you don't know, they might tweak something and then it affects the whole balance. And we saw that happen with Crypto Valleys, where like it died out because they changed the Sage mechanics. And that's kind of like one issue with these, I'd say, like really like fast dying out GameFi projects. Like I'm not sure how long Fantasy.top will last. Like agreeing, I agreed with you both. And like initially, I was like, "Oh, this is like very CT native. This probably doesn't do that well for that long." But like these quick, I don't want to say quick, but basically like DeFi, some form of DeFi elements wrapped up in pixels. These types of games that like you expect to die down relatively quickly, at least like maybe 2 months, 3 months. They have to like they need those dilution mechanics can really like kill them, especially if something like the dev tweaks one thing and people are like, okay, well, this is not worth my time anymore. But in terms of like, is it more interesting than NFTs? 100%. At least like you get to do something with it. That's it.
Yeah, it's something new and different. So I mean, that alone is worth something. I mean, me and Turf talk all the time, like just some type of minor addition. I forget exactly how you phrase it. Turf.
Iteration.
Yeah, some type of
Sufficiently iterative.
It's what we saw with NFTs, how they kind of, they would iterate and then it got to a point where they can't. And it's not to say that, what Fantasy Top has done is like, the greatest thing ever, but it's an iteration and then something else can be built on top of that. So I'm glad to see that is at least, it's a different game in a sense that we haven't really seen it. And I agree there are certain, dilution elements and mechanics that I mean, really like kind of similar to in-game economies, like that stuff needs to be meticulously managed because one wrong tweak, like you said, Bach, can kind of, I mean, it can tarnish the whole ecosystem. So it is something different and it's interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as kind of like the DeFi elements and the spreadsheet aspects go, like it gets to the point where you can start modeling it out, and then obviously the blast rewards and gold and everything else in there add a lot of different elements that people are figuring out. So I think that's kind of why it's exciting as well. Is there's kind of 3, 4, 5 different mechanics and factors that go into the equation, and a lot of it is kind of a guessing game. So that's what gets people excited when you can it's kind of your assumptions versus the other market participants' assumptions without a lot of known details. So in that sense, it's exciting, and we'll see where it goes over the next few weeks and Blast's eventual launch and how that'll impact stuff and the volume there. But in the short term, it's exciting and it's something different, and I'm always for exploring that and supporting that at least in the short term.
Yeah, those guys also made 9 mil last week apparently, like just based off fees, which is ridiculous. Like these SocialFi, whatever consumer SocialFi, GameFi products, they've been making bank.
Yeah, Friendtech too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Friendtech's another. I mean, it's interesting that the token's been down over the past couple days, but I mean, it was kind of interesting how obviously the 100% airdrop. Like, I mean, I love Racer for that. Everything he did was awesome there. But it was kind of like when I was anticipating the launch, and then it's kind of like this is just a pull to token. Like, I don't know how much you can go up because the market is so. I feel like kind of the participants left in the market, like they're so used to what that entails, and generally that entails the main token just going down only because it's essentially farmed. So it's a difficult balance, that's for sure. And I mean, it's a lot of this stuff, like we said, we've seen before.
Yeah. Like throughout the bear, those pool two, like whatever form of wrapping they did on pool two mechanics, it was like, oh, this is like actually not pool two anymore. We're doing like V, free farming or whatever. It's just been down only. We don't have that nobody believes in stuff
Right.
at this point, and it's just been pain for all of those types of coins.
I think on that point, it's interesting that you mentioned crypto valleys and how it died very, very quickly compared to everything else. And I was having a conversation with a friend, I think a while back, and the idea or the main core of it basically came down to every single cycle or every single time there's this new tech which is novel and it's interesting to use. And the next time someone tries it after it's been already tried, it just doesn't work. So you had the 3-3 with Ohm go absurdly high because it was the first of its kind. You had DeFi Kingdoms was the initial one that went really high. You had, I think, Yen was, I think, the first kind of pool 2 type yield farming thing that went really high as well. And every time you get a reskin of these things, and like, oh, but rather than doing some X, rather than burning something, we're doing revenue share, so on and so forth. People are sort of used to the idea that it's not novel anymore, and that's why I think it's almost like the curtain has been lifted, so to speak. And every time someone does the same thing again, it just doesn't work as much as it should because people already know how it should work or how it already does work. So like I said, I think I mentioned this a couple days ago that there is a lack of innovation in crypto space as a whole that makes things interesting. And because there is nothing happening, like there is nothing to kickstart people kind of coming and showing off. So DeFi kickstarted the entire like 2017 wave, like you could argue. Then you had NFTs part of the entire thing where like, oh, it's kind of it's pictures on the blockchain, but hey, we can do token gating, we can do X, we can do Y, we can do Z. We have like royalties or creators and all these different things. And then you had open editions and all these different things. And recently, there's just been nothing like that. It's always been just reskins of stuff that's existing. It's like, oh yeah, like we have restaking and stuff like that, but that's not interesting for most people, right? It's like it's interesting for people who are crypto native who get yield on the assets they already have, but then for the person coming in, why should they bother if that makes sense? The only thing that's happening right now for the collective was like Memecoin Solana or Base with Pump.Fun, right? You have all these different things happening. So if there's something new that's kind of even somewhat interesting and it kind of gets mind share, it's going to be much more interesting. But right now, because all these things have been tried and tested, and by tested I mean they've mostly gone down, any new attempts of the same thing is not going to go as far as people would like it to.
Yeah, I think that's a large portion why, I mean, like this entire kind of SocialFi like name started taking off is partially because it was something that kind of hadn't really been done before. And obviously, I mean, Farcaster stats and what they've built are amazing. And Friendtech, like, I mean, there's some novelty like in the platform there, and the benefit that goes to creators, and then Fantasy top too. But I kind of feel like everybody wants to, I don't know, make the SocialFi thing kind of happen because it hasn't really been done. But really, when you kind of strip away some of the pieces, a lot of it looks similar to some of the DeFi and kind of aspects that we've seen before. But it's like I said, it's still exciting and it's something different. And Farcaster, I mean, Terv can speak on Farcaster more than any of us here, but what they're doing there, I think, is probably the most sustainable by far, just because I mean, obviously, when you put off the token, and there is no token that's tied to the name, obviously people associate degen with it. But that gives it more staying power, and I mean, some of the user metrics they have there, I mean, they speak for themselves. So I think that's the most exciting SocialFi thing to me right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the overarching themes that are that's rather new is all of this is kind of connected to creating an on-chain reputation in a way that people didn't do as much in like 2021 or 2022. Like, there's what's his name, the bread guy who was tracking people dumping their friend and that the other thing. But Farcaster is definitely one of the most interesting for that, just because if you're in a channel and they're getting to the point where like you can gate channels based on NFTs held or this, that, the other thing based on your FID, your Farcaster ID. And then you look at Friendtech and it's like they have the snapshot of key club holders or key holders And all of those things are kind of building towards. And then, yeah, Fantasy Top does it as well, where it's like you can go on the leaderboard and it's like I can see like my friends in the top 20 like Twitter accounts that I know. And I think that is cool because it adds a level of transparency, I guess. And it's like obviously there are still ways where it's like if you want to be unknown on the blockchain, you can. But I think we're reaching a level of normalization of on-chain reputation that provides another layer of opportunity for people to create and distribute things on chain to people who they have a reason to give it to. It's like, and degen and other Farcaster tipping tokens are very interesting in that regard because like with a traditional meme coin, like somebody can go in and buy up the supply. Like I tweeted 2 or 3 days ago or something about how like, yes, meme coins are fully diluted, but a lot of them are just like, insider fest at the beginning. And it's like, it's kind of necessary almost in a way to break something out from amongst all the possibilities. But now with degen, it's like, I've gone on plenty of rants on Farcaster about the tipping culture and like people, you need to like speak with your tips for what is right, because anytime you provide humans social incentive for profit, it's like it's just going to bring out the worst in them.
Yeah.
Classic. But the fact that degen is distributed to people who are actually doing something is, it's almost like a like social mining. And I think Pac Moon on Blast does this as well, where it's like depending on your content creation. And I haven't been super into the Blast scene, but depending on like your content creation, you get distributions and that type of thing, and the potential for like Ansem airdropping all of his key holders keys to the club that he made. And it's like those things provide opportunity for distribution that it kind of started with like airdrops to NFT collections, and that's the same type of thing where it's like, okay, instead of picking your distribution based off like this artificial, like, oh, did you use this swap or whatever, like were you farming ZK sync and blah blah, it's like you can actually put more thought into how you're distributing things and how you're rewarding people based on-chain reputation. And I think that that's going to be something that we continue to see develop through all of these things: Farcaster, Fantasy Top, Friend Tech, etc.
Yeah, I agree with the distribution mechanics. I feel like the NFT airdrop wave that we had like a couple months ago was the first iteration of that. And then now people are realizing like, okay, maybe actually I don't even think people have realized that it might make more sense to do this to like, because SocialFi users, especially those who are active, are like people who are the most on chain. And I feel like that's who you want to, I mean, we can talk, I don't know if that's who you want to drop your tokens to. I feel like every time I have people on the podcast, we're talking about airdrops, but it's just
people love tokens.
yeah, people love tokens. People, yeah. What do you guys think? How do you think like the recent, I guess, like airdrop meta has been working out? Because that's like where I was going to be headed, but I'd rather not say the same thing that I've said over the past few weeks on the pod.
Yeah.
I think me and Tokes talked about this a while, like a couple of weeks ago as well. Where I'm like a hardcore My Lady, and Tokes like a hardcore Mad Lad. So it's like different chains. But then Mad Lads has been one of the most kind of airdropped collection, and then My Ladies are sort of kind of gaining the mind share of the sense that hey, it's a My Lady owned protocol. We don't sell our airdrops and stuff like that. And a lot of the people, I think now, or a lot of the developers for protocols are sort of realizing, or not realizing, they're experimenting with the idea that if we can kind of target these cult like PFP collections where people historically haven't sold their NFTs, or like they like the art, or like they have a certain allocation to them or whatever. That's going to gain more mind share, because looking from 2021 to now, it's like most of the collections are dead, right? Like most of the NFT have gone down, like down only, and there's been a very select few that have survived and have even gone up in value. And all of us kind of have those NFTs right now. Like you have Puppet. No, you're not doing so recently hot right now, but like regardless, like it's got this vibe to them. Mad Lads has always been, I think, the premier Solana NFT, and then you have kind of My Lady, which is kind of it's literally like it's like Ethereum cult, so to speak, with like Remilio, you have Rad Bros, and all these different things. So you have these entire incentives kind of working as a collection of, okay, these guys don't do a certain thing that's expected of most people, so they won't sell the airdrop, so on and so forth. And even Pudgy Penguins is the other one that has a lot of DeFi builders and have gotten other drops before. So I think, yeah, Tokes and add, I think, the rest of the stuff to that as well.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the first reasons that I was so bullish on Mad Lads, is just because, I mean, really the idea was that they're building the backpack exchange, and eventually you could potentially get the backpack airdrop, and then um, there was a ton of other. I mean, in the Jito wormhole, there's Dimension, there's been plenty, and that was kind of the entire thesis behind that. And it goes back to what Turk was talking about, the on-chain social. And I mean, airdrops, they're never going to be perfect. Like, you give people tokens, like free money, essentially out of thin air. Like, it's going to be, some of it's going to be sold. But what I think a lot of people are realizing is that there's, certain NFT communities that I would say it's not even so much about the community, but maybe like the standing in the broader like CT community. Like they have more reach, they have more social capital, and it it kind of becomes like a compounding effect to reward those type of people because of the reach that they have, and again, like the social capital, and it's just better for the token overall. So I think we're generally in the earlier stage of kind of NFTs being used as a distribution mechanism. And then going back to what Turf said again about Farcaster and Fantasy Top and all of this, the on-chain identity, like all of that stuff is still kind of in the earliest stages to me. And obviously, we want certain levels of privacy, but you can have certain addresses that you have assets in, and that's like a public wallet, like an ENS, and it's kind of like an iteration on top of that to me. And being used as a distribution method, like it makes all the sense in the world, and it's way better, in my opinion, like orders of magnitude better than farming some random, some L2, some random decks, like, and rewarding the users who are on there, Cybele swapping over and over and over. Like, yeah, you can have multiple NFTs, but at least it's a higher barrier to entry than, like the industrial Cybele farming.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like, anytime people are complaining about airdrop farmers on those, like, let's say on ZK Sync or other like bridges and stuff, it's mainly, I don't think people care that much about like the individual Sybil farmers. Those can get weeded out pretty easily.
Mhm.
It's like the industrial ones that they've bought like 400 Mac minis, and they're like clicking using Selenium and stuff, and like faking these transactions really well.
Or paying, yeah, I mean, even paying people. Like, I don't think, I mean, it's talked about here and there, but I don't think people realize the level of, I mean, you saw it with the StarkNet. Like, you can just look at their transactions and users after the token launch. Like, the L2s and the stuff like that. Like, people don't realize that a lot of those metrics, there's serious capital behind the ability to farm this stuff. So yeah, using some type of on-chain identity, and I think the purest form that we have of that right now is certain NFT collections. So it just makes all the sense in the world that certain ones will continue to be rewarded through distribution, because I mean, at least if I was, distributing a token, like there would be certain that's the best way I can think of to, distribute it. And again, like there's no perfect way to give out, X amount of essentially free money. Like some of it's going to be sold, like, it's a marketing expense, whatever, but there has to be a better way than what we've seen.
Yeah. Boffin, you mentioned something interesting. NFTs have been down only. This is like when I asked about what should I ask Tervo, Talks, and Boffin, this was like 30% of the questions is what you guys think of ETH NFTs, what we think if they'll like. And I guess like I also have an add-on question to this aside from the general crowd. Like Milady's puppets, these I don't want to say esoteric, but slightly esoteric NFTs have been doing really well. And like the traditional, I don't know how to describe it, but just like PFP NFTs where it's like, I don't know, a good example is like DGods or Utes, like these forms of NFTs, they just haven't been doing particularly well. What do you guys think about that? Like, how do you see ETH NFTs evolving over the, or like in general, all NFTs evolving over the, say, 6-12 months?
I think so off that tweet about where NFT market volume and participants move to things that are both more interesting, more complex and simpler. I think a lot of the projects, like I was saying, like if you go read through page one, it's like, mid 2022. A lot of these projects like wanted to be like a streetwear brand or this, that, the other thing. And it's like, at the end of the day, my follow-up tweet was that a lot of NFTs were simple ideas that are masquerading as complex ideas. And it's like, when you're building your community around like, oh, we want to be the next Disney, like we're going to do this, that, the other thing, we have this big roadmap. And it's like the roadmap NFTs are really the ones that we've seen die out. It's like, we don't see that. You don't see roadmaps anymore, really. And it's like the things that have been successful are the ones that never promised you anything and that, had their own communities form around them regardless of how insane they are. Pudgy's is a different example because they actually executed very well on the complexities that they said they were going to do. And they're kind of building out that environment. But at the same time, that's also about the fact that they had the real community. And it's like, what we really saw is this, the ones that were selling you a vision nobody's buying that anymore. And so it's really just the ones that have people who are interested in them regardless of price. Because if you look at Pudgy, it's like they were down bad. What's his name? Former founder Cole, sold them. And then on the rise back up, it's like Luca bought them. But when he bought them, it's like, even then there wasn't that many people who believed in them. It was a group that was formed around these core believers. And with whether or not we're ever going to get back to the point where, like, because when I got into crypto, like I was sitting on Icy Tools. I had the Icy Tools mint page open like every single day, just at work, like just waiting to see what would pop up. And it's like, that has transitioned. That is now pumped out fun,
Yeah.
And so that's where that volume's kind of gone. And the things that we see take off now, I mean, I don't even remember what was the last winning NFT mint on ETH. Like,
Pandora, I'd say, would be the other one, right?
yeah, except it went down only after that.
Exactly. So like,
And it's like, 404s are an interesting thing. And I feel like we'll probably get back to playing around with that idea. But the NFTs that have been successful, Solana NFTs have been down only. A lot of ETH NFTs have been down only. And we've kind of made a transition towards ordinals being where you can store, just something that's just a profile picture. And I think that probably continues. I do think there's a lot of opportunity. Like, you can feel it on base and on blast, like the opportunity for a mint season to happen in terms of like something just going crazy. But those are both for different reasons as well. It's like on base, a lot of the communities for the NFTs that have been successful are formed on Farcaster around actual communities like Onchain Gaius, like tiny base toads, frogs, like
Just reading one of them, isn't
Farcats
there?
was one. There's a bunch of other Farcaster native NFT collections, and then Blast is kind of like, just because Blur is great at incentivization and these types of things, and I'm very curious to see how that progresses once we get into past the first airdrop, because I think it's, I would be incredibly surprised if they didn't do a season 2 type uh, points program deal like they did with Blur. But I am skeptical that we will ever see a mint season, a la 2021, 2022 on ETH mainnet. I think a lot of that volume will either move towards it moves towards things that are more interesting, like SocialFi. It moves towards things that are simpler, like Memecoins, and then it moves towards ordinals, where it debatably makes more sense to create a collection that you want to kind of stand the test of time. And that's, I think the art market is a different beast, and we've yet to see a huge amount of the art market move from ETH to ordinals or to Sol or to L2s. Well, besides Zora L2 is very cool. There's a lot of artists on there, but a lot of the art infrastructure is still on ETH mainnet.
Yeah.
And I think it'll probably just be more of the same, more built around community and like actual psychopathic cult like holders, and who are just passionate about this thing for next to no reason. It's not because there's a roadmap. And I would be very surprised if we ever made it back to the point where roadmap NFTs are popular.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I mean, to the provenance thing, I'm more bullish on like ordinals, and ETH NFTs are kind of stuck in like between a rock and a hard place, because like Turf said, like you would think that if it's a PFP for or some NFT picture, and you want the provenance, like ideally, I mean, like you can make the case that, I mean, BTC is obviously the oldest chain. It's more lendy, so you would assume that stuff would move there if the argument is provenance. And I do think that the provenance argument has a lot of weight, because I think there's a reason that NFTs on L2s never really ever took off, despite the numerous attempts and people kind of waiting for certain aspects of ETH to move to L2s. And it's because the high value stuff, there's no high value NFTs on L2s, because you trust the provenance of ETH, and you don't have to have trust assumptions that come with L2s. So if that's the reasoning to why they haven't been on L2s, then why would they not move to BTC? Because you would think you have higher trust assumptions there. So as far as ETH NFTs, like PFP wise, like I agree that I don't really ever see kind of the wave that we have come back, because I do think meme coins have captured a lot of that. What I do see kind of expanding ETH NFT wise is going back to the programmability, that BTC can't afford NFTs, and stuff that has been talked about forever about, you see Arcade doing some interesting stuff with like the tokenization and lending against, Rolexes and luxury items and things like that. Like that stuff is very slowly making its way on chain, and the volume's going up. And then, you have all the pie in the sky ideas of essentially like an NFT is just, it's a wrapper of a one-on-one item. So, whether that's like, a car or house deed, whatever, like I'm still kind of I guess like, again, like pie in the sky, like believer in that stuff. And that's more where I think ETH NFTs are headed, to where you bring higher value, um, I guess, assets on chain, and then you have the lending and borrowing and all of that built around it, and that type of programmability is still yet to kind of be facilitated on BTC. So that's kind of like the market to where I would see ETH NFTs going, if that makes sense. More of like the functionality and then the programmability around them, versus the strict, pictures or gambling. Kind of those ends of the barbell spectrum are moving to meme coins, and then I'd say BTC, and then everything else in the middle around programmability and tokenization and RWA type stuff, that is still really good on ETH because it's, flexibility and programmability.
Yeah, that take, the provenance take, that's also what Suzu talked about, like 3 episodes in a row on the Oxdale thing. And I do agree with him. It's like, if you're gonna, and I agree with you as well, it's like, if you're gonna hold a high value NFT, you want to hold it on BTC or ETH. Like Solana's great, but I don't want to hold it on Solana. I don't know why. It just feels more patriotic if it's on BTC or ETH.
You're not a man.
Tervo, you brought up Zora, and they also have like kind of a Solana equivalent, Drip House. And I was bringing up, I brought up NFTs on a work call, and people were like surprisingly excited for Zora and Drip House, and that's new wave of like, I guess, creators selling their I don't know if you call these open editions as well, but like these mass identical NFTs on these new apps. I don't really see the vision, but I mean, apparently, like, as far as I've seen, Zora is doing incredible volume. They're earning quite a lot in fees as well. But I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm midwitting it. I just don't really see why it's that popular.
I think there's been kind of a shift and like you can see it with ETH. I don't know which term I want to use for this, but like ETH heads just .eths on Farcaster, and there's kind of been a shift from like on-chain scarcity to like on-chain abundance, and I think that is it is what's powering a lot of like Drip House and Zora is ease of access for both creators and collectors. It is interesting, and I think we will continue to kind of move towards this on-chain abundance idea, and because it kind of started in like early 2023 with the open edition meta and just artists being more willing to do things like that, where it's like, okay, maybe you're seeing this shift where it's like artists are not as hesitant to mint things, because like I remember, because me and Boffin both collect a bunch of stuff just for fun, and it's like yesterday I minted something from Amon. It was in the Art of the Metaverse collection, and it's just an open edition, but I think you see more people who are just happy to collect things from people they enjoy. And I think that's a culture we'll kind of move towards, or we're seeing movement towards, where it's like it creates more connection between the creators and the collectors when it's more accessible. And again, it goes back to on-chain reputation stuff, where it's like, okay, I can see that you are on Drip House. I can see that you're on Zora, and it gives creators another layer of distribution again. And I think that the idea that things need to be scarce to have value is kind of being shifted in the NFT world.
Yeah, anytime you can have fun when you're collecting stuff, I guess that might be the reason that people like it. I signed up for some Drip House stuff. I went on there. It was mostly like Alec Monopoly type of art. When I logged in, maybe it's improved a bit. But I don't think I like spent enough time maybe to figure it out.
Yeah, I haven't either just dove in enough to fully understand Drip House, but it's like there's Degen Poet, who has basically like kind of made a career off his Drip House stuff. And it's cool to see people who, again, it's like with Fantasy Topic, gives you something where you can buy into this and follow along with it. It's like people log into Drip House every day and like are just happy to collect a piece from the person that they enjoy. And but yeah, it's like moving towards on-chain fun, I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Tolks, you brought up putting, I guess, like assets on chain. I know that like you guys wrote something on digital assets. Do you want to like kind of give your page one thesis on this? I disclaimer: the only like digital asset stuff that I looked into was what you mentioned, which is like watches and stuff on chain. That was for like real world assets, just to see like how well they're doing. They're not doing particularly well. And Mina Swap, which is supposedly like meant to launch, and it was like difficult to even acquire information on them.
Yeah, the federal piece is Boffin, so I'll pass it to him in a minute because I'm generally like you, Bach. I'm not too deep into that arena. But as far as like the asset tokenization stuff, like again, the volumes they're relatively small, but just the fact that you're using the programmability of ETH in like in a global distributed fashion to wherever you are in the world to put a Rolex or luxury item on chain, and you can borrow against that with obviously you need the liquidity on the other side and somebody to provide the loan, but the potential that can be done in say 2 minutes, 3 minutes versus what that would take to take that physical item somewhere and get it appraised and a loan against. So that space, I have eyes on it. Like I said, the volumes they're relatively small, but that's something that I'm monitoring as time goes on because I think that space is only going to grow. But as far as like the actual digital aspect, Bob, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. I think digital assets are sort of interesting in the light that there's two ways you can go down, and you can go down the hyper luxury route, which a lot of the Web3 startups are trying to go down in. Like you have like a merch, you have 90 double C by G Money, and all the other things which are very digital and interconnected. I think is the entire point they're going for, where each garment kind of lives in its own network, and then you can talk to people who have the same thing and connect with them. And then on the other side, you have like putting actual assets on chain. So like we have Arcade by Castro and team, where you have like your Rolexes, you have your Pokemon collections, and then I think at one point they had like all of these the Supreme teas, and they had like an entire collection of them, which they put on chain. And then you have the other the bigger opportunity, which I think TradFi is going to push forwards with like assets like you have stocks, you have like your commodities like gold and other stuff on chain, and this all sort of leans into the programmable nature of ETH, right? Which other platforms or other chains can't really compete with, in the sense that the biggest developer market, of which is also on ETH and its L2s, while also having the biggest sort of audience base in that regard. And tokenization is interesting in that manner because you can also look into the stuff as, okay, so we have Arcade, you have all the other thing that's a meaningful volume for the idea because the first ones to do it. At the same time, they're doing it in a way that's very front end. If someone was to kind of develop these solutions, like the, let's say a Rolex second market like loan service, right? What I want to call that. But if they did it in a way that made everything kind of on the back end, and all you had to do was essentially authenticate or send your Rolex and someone authenticates it and says, yep, this is this Rolex and we can kind of get you this value, and do you want a loan on this or not as collateral, and just do that without touching on blockchain stuff. But on the back end, it's all blockchain authenticated and backed. I think that's going to be a big opportunity in a very similar regard to how I just see blockchain in general, where it's very good for the provenance stuff, but then the provenance stuff needs to need provenance, if that makes sense. Where I I why okay, so like I've said in the digital piece, where like if I have a Nike shoe and I have like a rare Travis Scott Nike, I can't remember the names now. Say I have a rare shoe. Unless I'm selling that shoe to someone else, or unless I'm collecting it for the love of the game, I don't really care if it's authenticated or not, because I'm wearing it. It doesn't matter. If I am accessing it, or if I'm thinking on the financial markets, that's when I start caring about all the other stuff like that. So if you're just doing stuff for the fun of it, I don't think it really matters. But there is a growing demand for a market that wants more assets and wants more liquidity in general. And that's where I think tokenization really, really shines through for all the other stuff, where you have like rare comic books, you have like your shoes, you have watches, you have paintings and all the other stuff. And NFTs have sort of proven this concept a lot with digital art and like its physical counterparts, so to speak. So tokenization in that regard is very new. Like it's not being experimented enough in. Like, of course, we can talk about, oh, we have like stock trading for 24/7, but it's done on the blockchain, so it can't be fudged with. But that's not inherently interesting, if that makes sense. Like, so the stock markets just open up for a longer time. That's how cryptos have always been. But the programmable nature of it, like we've talked before, like you have the ERC 404s, where you can have like a full token as an entire NFT, but then you can have the same token into hundreds of thousands of different units, which you can kind of split apart and give to other people, and then kind of make an economy out of that. That's going to be more interesting, and that kind of goes into the more experimental nature of what ETH always has been about.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think will like? How do you think tokenization will, I guess, develop over the next? I don't know if you have a strong take on this, but I agree with you. I'm not like a huge fan of tokenized stocks, and like frankly, I don't think anybody is. If you look at the volume that they do, it's very low. Like nobody at this currently, let's say, it might get better eventually, but right now it's not really particularly popular. But I like that. Like I remember when I first read about Minaswap, and I don't know if this exactly fits into digital slash tokenized assets. But I was like semi excited because I feel like we talked about this like all throughout the pod, but it was new and it's like kind of exciting. But I'm not sure like where we go from here. What do you think is like, or like what do you think is like a valid attempt at tokenizing more and more collectible assets?
Um, I mean, okay, there's a really PC take and there's a really hot take, right? And I'll start with the more digestible take right now. I think after COVID, once you had like all the things shooting up in price, like Pokemon cards and Magic the Gathering cards and comics and the stuff, that sort of died down to pre-COVID levels because people didn't have anything to do, right? They knew of these things, but they weren't forced to do them in that regard. So kind of tokenizing hobbyist collections will always be very niche and it won't hit mainstream because those things aren't mainstream as a whole, which was the entire point of kind of NFTs as social status item in the metaverse. I think that was the go-to NFT thesis in 2021 to kind of have the entire things where like that hasn't worked out in the way it has because as we already know, like the metaverse isn't huge or like there isn't anything that kind of gains peak popularity. You can count Roblox, that's popular, but that's kind of the metaverse without NFTs and working fine for the Roblox company, right? The more cynical take or the more hot take for tokenization bull thesis would essentially be that the traditional finance system is very exploitative and it is very um, deceptive by its nature. That because of how it works, it's sort of like a if you keep it hush, I keep it hush as well, and then we can both profit from this. If you were to add tokenization of assets and stocks like that, it sort of creates a medium that can't be manipulated and it can call people out on their bullshit, right? Where you can be like you have stuff in traditional fund like dark pools, which basically is semi-anonymous trading about like how you can like dump our stocks very quickly without notifying the people or other participants, so on and so forth. And people are always trying to look stuff like that. And then you have the now defunct London interbanking exchange rate, or the LIBOR as it was, which was in massive scandals and back when they were like fudging the numbers up on how like bank mortgage and stuff work. Like I said, very boring stuff in that regard. But then it sort of opened up an entire gateway into the stuff that we don't even know how the systems work, and they can be colluded with other participants to basically get the most money out. If you were to put these things on chain, right? And then you were trading off of that, the blockchain as a whole can't be manipulated. And it would then act as a sort of trust verifier or like a transaction verifier that isn't controlled by anyone. And that's a lot more interesting to kind of work with. And then you have companies like JP Morgan having like their entire having entire blockchain areas which they are building. Like one of them is called Onyx, which basically is getting these assets on chain, and then for these high net worth individuals or businesses, where they basically say, hey, put your stuff on the blockchain, and then we will basically do the KYC and all the other stuff for that. And they're going to be getting more and more market share. I know BlackRock is doing the exact same thing. I know Fidelity was also kind of working on this on the back end, where they basically want to put all of their assets on chain as a verification purpose tools, rather than having to manage databases or collude with other parties. So as a sort of no bullshit filter against other people who also want to make more money, in that PvP setting, tokenization makes a lot more sense than it would, and this would never affect 99% of the participants, right? It's only for the people back then. On the more hobbyist side, it's still a very niche thing, which, I mean, will gain traction. Don't get me wrong. Like when we have periods of high net or high generation making of money, like let's say we have after the COVID stimulate, the COVID stimmy check, as we call it, was a thing where people made lots of money. Then you had like the bull market before that and all the things. Like you'll always have people spending money on hobbyist items, and that's a fair enough like business model to have. But it won't be as mainstream as people want it to be, because those things inherently aren't mainstream.
Perfect. Yeah, you know that thing you mentioned about verifiability in the blockchain and like how BlackRock and Fidelity are moving on chain. I actually like there's quite a few countries issuing bonds on chain. Now this isn't related to verifiability, but it's more like the other tokenization like feces, which is like liquidity, which is something that you also mentioned. And it's just like
You have
easy.
Singapore, you have Italy moving their bonds on chain. Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, I think it was like Philippines and maybe also Hong Kong. Also a few companies as well. Before we move on to more questions, let's have a quick word from Radiant. Thanks to our fantastic sponsor, LayerZero. All right, guys, for this week's LayerZero segment, we have Isaac, the Director of Project Management and Communications at Radiant, an omnichain borrowing and lending protocol. Thank you so much for coming on, Isaac.
Hey, excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Just to kick us off, what is Radiant and how do you guys fit into the current money market landscape?
Radiant is a leading lending and borrowing protocol with the aim to unify the fragmented liquidity in DeFi. So basically, making it possible and seamless for any user to deposit on one chain, borrow on a different chain, and repay on a third chain. And we're getting there with our current V2 and V3 launches.
Very good. How does LayerZero fit into Radiant?
Well, LayerZero is at the backbone of Radiant. Radiant was built on top of LayerZero. We started using for V1 Stargate stable router. So basically, any user could then deposit on Arbitrum and bridge the borrowed funds they wanted to borrow over to any of the supported chains, Avalanche, Polygon, and so on. Now for V2, we went one step further and we integrated LayerZero as part of the protocol. In essence, our own RDNT native token is now an OFT token, which makes it super seamless to move it around the three chains we're currently live on. That's Arbitrum, BNB, and Mainnet. And in the future, we will integrate more assets as OFTs in the money markets to be able to move them seamlessly so that users don't need to know what's happening under the hood. They don't need to understand about L1s, L2s, bridges, different wallets. They just move the token seamlessly, deposit on one chain, borrow, and repay on different chains.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal setup, given that there's millions of chains now and you have to deal with a lot. I'd love to hear more about what you guys are planning on working on over the next 6 to 12 months. Do you have any exciting updates?
Absolutely. Well, yes, I have some updates, exciting updates for the 6 next months coming down the road, but I also have some alpha for you guys today. Basically, we will be launching new assets on our core markets. So some LRTs, we're already launching Rug.Fun, for example. We will also be launching on new chains. Base will be the first one if our DAO approves. An important alpha is that we're thrilled to be working on non-EVM chains. That's Solana. Well, that will be probably end of this year, beginning of next year. And the most important feature that we're launching for Radiant V3 is RIS. That's how we call our isolated markets. That stands for Radiant Innovation Zones. But basically, think that will allow us to add to the protocol in an isolated risk fashion any tokens from LRTs, RWAs, memes, any of the hot narratives in crypto, and that's going to boost Radiant. And the last thing that we're going to add will be dual emissions. So we will be able to stream rewards paid in any of those exciting tokens that are going to be airdropped soon. So that's going to be added to Radiant too.
Perfect. That all sounds really exciting. Thank you so much for hopping on, Isaac.
Okay, was thrilled to be here. Thanks for having us. Cheers.
All right, we're back. Guys, before we end it and wrap it up, do you guys want to kind of talk a bit about what you guys are looking forward to over the next 6 to 12 months, like narratives, particularly the Memecoin Supercycle idea, which is something that I disagree with, but I want to hear your takes on it as well.
I think there's been that graphic about Pump.Fun and just the number of tokens that have been created in the past 2 months. It's like there's been more tokens created on ETH and L2s in the past month than there was in the past 3 years. And then Solana is making 20,000 new tokens a day or something. And I just tweeted this morning about how it's incredibly difficult to differentiate between these tokens. It's even harder than it was 3 months ago. And it's the probability of you finding the next whiff or the next Michi is just going down every day. So I think I'm curious to see whether or not we get some form of iteration with that. And there was Worm created
Rug.Fun, right?
Yeah, Rug.Fun is the type of thing that I think has an opportunity to succeed, because Rug.Fun, it's a competition between these tokens, and the number 1 token in the pool and the number 10 token in the pool both get launched into a liquidity pool, and the rest get rugged. And so it kind of creates a taste-making sense to Pump.Fun to Pump.Fun, and it kind of gives people more opportunity, more selection, more focus, and I think there's opportunity for that to continue happening, just because if there's 50,000 meme coins launched a day, it's impossible to have any edge in picking which one of these animal pictures from MySpace in 2006 is going to go up.
Sounds like a skill issue.
Yeah, Tervo, they might put me in jail because you mentioned Rug.Fun on the podcast, brother. It's
a good protocol.
Rug.Fun is very fun. I think the first one had over 200 coins, and there was $500,000 won for the first and the last place. It's ridiculously good. It's that's a good idea for a crypto native thing, which is experimental, and it kind of leans into the idea that, oh hey, if we are truly in the Memecoin Supercycle, why not kind of fully go into it with a meme of what's the midway and what's the left and the right, right? It's a fantastic idea, and the stuff like that. And I think I'm just so the bullish thing I'm on is basically is more experimental stuff happening, where you have on-chain games doing stuff that is really esoteric, right? There was this one game, and I forgot the name of it, but it's an on-chain game where you are basically missing body parts, right? And then you have to basically type in commands to get your body parts to connect with other bionic stuff. And it's an entire lore building thing, and it's simple enough. But then these kind of things don't get made in general. So to return to a bit of a weird niche thing where, hey, we're just experimenting with the medium is always more interesting to me. So Pump.Fun, very interesting. You have Rug.Fun, which is also great. You then have on-chain games, and then you have, I still believe 404s for ETH will come back at a certain point, because
I was going to say 404s as well.
I think they've got too much going on that people aren't experimenting with enough, because all the attention right now is on meme coins. And the thing with 404s is they trade like a meme coin if you wanted to, but then they are the individual tokens as well. So you can basically trade your way up to having this one NFT, so to speak. And then you can have an entire economy created around just this one token. So you don't need something like, oh, you have an NFT and then we're airdropping you this other ERC20 token. It's just it works together. And there's not enough experimentation going on with it. I know a couple of people have already made some tokens around this, Asterisk was one, which I kind of had for a while, and then you have all the other stuff. But I think in general, because there's so much attention on just meme coins, 404s I think will probably bring back the NFT market on ETH more than anything. I think because of their experimental programmable nature of them.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with you that 404s will come back, and I like this. Like, it feels like every, let's say, 6 months we try to do some new NFT liquidity thing. I know like 404 fees is a bit different because it's like actually tokenized, but we also had pseudo swap, and then before that we had like a bunch of increasing NFT liquidity or like doing something interesting with trading NFTs, fractionalizing them, etc. So I am excited for that. But I mean, the first iteration always dies out. So, like you said, I'm looking forward to what they're gonna be ending up building on it over, let's say, like a couple months. Tolks.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I don't know, the Memecoin Supercycle, like that gets it just the context. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things in life, like the gray is much better than just saying yes or no to that thesis. I don't think the volume and number of meme coins launched, like I don't think that's going anywhere. I would bet on it going pretty much up only, just because I don't know, like it seems like very clear product market fit to me. But what I will say is the dispersion of the number of meme coins that are being launched is just insanity. So maybe the heights that they reach, like, people obviously see Doge and Floki, and like with Pepe going over 4 billion recently, like obviously the next targets become 10 billion, and then Floki, and then Doge, and then you have Whiff. Like the scale goes up. So what I think will probably happen is there will be the heights to which they can reach are kind of capped because there's endless new ones coming online. So the liquidity kind of shifts. Similar to what we've seen with like altcoins, really. I mean, with the amount of launches, like people are kind of scratching their heads this cycle about where we are and whatnot, because it hasn't played out to how they would think about how money flows from BTC to ETH and then to altcoins. And we kind of skipped over that. And I think a large part of it is because of the dispersion and the valuations. Like,
Yeah.
And so I think those dynamics will be very similar. In meme coins. So I'm kind of in the middle ground on the super cycle thesis. So I don't think they're going anywhere. I think the volume is sticky and it'll be here for pretty much ever. But I think the heights that they can reach, I don't think people have kind of come to the fact that as the number grows and as you have more between the 100 to say 1 billion range, like that liquidity was all focused on to say 3 or 4 or 5 in previous cycles. And once that dispersion is just, I mean, it's increased every day because the number of launches that are happening. So that's kind of how I'm generally thinking about it.
Yeah, that's also fair. I'm not sure. I agree with you that like liquidity is fragmented, but I feel like we're now having so much stuff kind of appear that could potentially support this, like Memecoin Supercycle fees. Like you guys mentioned, there's like actually people are trying to build stuff on top of meme coins. There was like that world thing that launched a couple days ago. That's kind of like a meme coin as well, I'd say, even though
Yeah.
it's not necessarily. Also, like Van Eck launched the meme coin index. I don't know if you guys saw that, but
Are you calling top?
What?
Are you calling top because of that?
No, I'm never calling top, especially on the podcast, man. They'll clip it and they'll roast me for the next weeks. But yeah, overall, guys, I want to thank you very much for coming on. This was the first time that we did something like this, and it was an incredible time. And I really appreciate you guys for hopping on.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us anytime, Buck.